Yes, this Honorable County Commission meeting is now open pursuant to adjournment. The Honorable Jesse Wallace is present and presiding. All you have business, come forward and you shall be heard. God bless this great state, county, and nation. Mr. Hughes, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful and this beautiful day that you so richly blessed us with. We thank you for all the blessings that you have bestowed, not only upon this country, but this state and this county. And I pray that this legislative body will look to you for the help that we need to make this county even greater. Watch over us and care for us, my prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Wallace will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Wilson, you give us a roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman?
Here.
Mr. Daniel? Mr. Dellinger?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Ms. Hampton? Here. Mr. Hooper? Mr. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Hunt?
Here.
Mr. Hurt?
Here.
Mr. Mayberry?
Here.
Ms. Phillips? Here. Mr. Rochelle?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Wagner?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. On the agenda, the next item is consideration and approval of previous minutes. Give you a moment to look those over, or I'll entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Wallace.
Motion, Mr. Wagner.
Second.
Second, Mr. Coleman. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, citizen petition and grievance. Anyone in the audience like to address the commission? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to receiving the committee reports, fiscal review, budget, personnel. Mr. Hughes.
The meeting was called to order on October the 5th at 4:30 in the afternoon with all members present. The first item of business was approval of the August 3rd minutes. Those were approved. The next item was the financial report for the month of July and August of 2015. The reports were presented, and after a motion and a second, these were voted on to approve. The first item of business we had is the Governor's Highway Safety Grant. This is the yearly grant that the sheriff applies for to assist in implementation of alcohol counting measures in the county. After discussion, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next item, the next resolution, was to appropriate $14,900. This is to apply for the anticipated funds from the governor's grant. After more discussion, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next item was delinquent taxes. Ms. Stanfield, Mr. Bullion, and Mr. Thomason reported on the collection of taxes for the past 3 years and the state of delinquent taxes at this time. We are anticipating a tax sale by the end of the year. The next resolution was building expense. This resolution to require and appropriate funds for the setup of a new modular building for the Sheriff's Department. This building will serve as office space for the staff and deputies. The approximate cost of $37,500. After explanation and discussion, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution was landfill closures. This resolution appropriates $8,500 for engineering fees associated to the potential partial closing of the Class 3, Class 4 landfill as directed by TDEC. And after discussion, recommendation, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution we had was the Health, Education, and Housing Boards. This resolution reappoints Robert Dodd and Denise Thomason to the Health, Education, and Housing Board with terms ending October 1, 2012. After discussion and recommendation, this was voted on to send to the full commission. and we adjourned at 5:13.
Commissioners, you heard the report from Mr. Hughes. Any questions for him or his committee? Hearing none, moving on to Public Works and Safety. Mr. Hunt?
Yes, the Public Works and Safety met on September the 28th at 4:30 with 6 members present. Approval of August the 24th minutes was accepted. Number 3 was on surplus property. This resolution is surplus property from the fire department. We recommend to send it on to the full commission. Next thing on the agenda was a asphalt roller bid. A resolution to accept the bid from Scott Equipment for a vibrator roller for $112,147.83. We approved to go on to the full commission. Next thing on the agenda is tilt trailer bid. A resolution to accept the bid from LMI for a 48 tilt trailer for $56,298.10. Motion was sent on to the full board. Adjournment at 4:40.
There you have the report from Mr. Hunt. Any questions for him or his committee? Hearing none, moving on. Report and communications for county executive. First of all, I'm sure, audience, you've noticed Colonel John Lee Williams never looked better. In fact, this is not Colonel Williams, but Mark Odle, who we asked to sit in Colonel Williams' absence. We appreciate your attendance, Mr. Odle. Next, Commissioners, as reported in committee a few months ago, our airport was recently inspected and found to be deficient as it relates to apron, the asphalt around the apron, and a few other items. I asked our engineers with PDC to provide an estimate for rehabilitation of that problem, and they provided an estimate of $590,289. On the 24th of September, I appeared before the Tennessee Aeronautics Commission and asked for award of non-primary entitlement funds equaling 90% of that, and they voted to provide that funding. In addition to that $531,000, the state of Tennessee has agreed to put up 5% of the total cost at $29,514. That'll leave costs on us of $29,514 for this $590,000 project. That money has already been appropriated, and we'll move forward with bid letting just as soon as that can be arranged. Now, Commissioners, citizens, as you know, we unfortunately live in a time when very little positive is reported as it relates to our law enforcement officers, and for that matter, any of our first responders. It's, I know and you know that this is due mainly to the fact that there's apparently not a lot of entertainment value in reporting positive things. This is a shame, to say the least. However, a well-deserved exception occurred recently when one of our deputies was featured in the area news story about his role in a life-saving effort following an accident on Highway 70 east of McEwen. And at this time, I'd like to ask Deputy Mike Adcox to join me up front. Mr. Adcox. So, we want to recognize your act of heroism, and we're doing so in this manner, with a proclamation of appreciation that reads, whereas throughout the various departments of public service, Humphreys County enjoys the benefit of having emergency responders who make routine, singular acts of valor which are worthy of special recognition. And whereas these brave men and women typically shun the notion of performance above and beyond duty, there are on occasion such actions which impact the community to the extent that they will not go unnoticed or underappreciated. And whereas in the very late evening hours of September 10, 2015, such an event occurred when, while on his way home after completing a successful day of service to the community in his capacity as a school resource officer for the institutions of learning located in McEwen, Tennessee, Deputy Michael E. Adcox yielded to the frantic summons of an unknown individual at the edge of the westbound lane of Highway 70 in Dixon County. And whereas Deputy Adcox quickly assessed the situation before responding to the notice of victims trapped in the now burning wreck of a vehicle found in the adjacent property and finding no driver, but instead the visage of an infant trapped by restraints in immediate peril due to both injury and enveloping flame. And whereas at his own peril, he went into the burning vehicle through the rear window and using his knife did cut away impediments and thus freeing the infant before carrying him to safety and before locating and delivering into safety the infant's father, also critically injured and lying prostrate beside the vehicle. Now therefore be it proclaimed that in appreciation for his bravery, the citizens of Humphreys County now honors the actions and service of Deputy Michael E. Adcox and salute him for the hero he is. Thank you. Moving on to resolutions. First item is appointment to the Health, Education, and Housing Board. Mr. Robert Dodd, term ending October 2021.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion, Mr. Hurt. Second, Mr. Wagner. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item, appoints Denise Thomason to Health, Education, Housing Board with the same term. Ms. Phillips, Ms. Hampton, made a second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Next item, County Fire Department has several pieces of equipment which is no longer in service and for which they wish to dispose. This resolution declares 7 vehicles as surplus and offers them for sale at public auction.
Move to approve.
Motion, Mr. Hughes.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hunt. Discussion.
Are these going to be sold at an auction or online or?
Probably on the Gov Deals online auction. I don't know that there's a lot of value there. We just need to get them off our books.
Ms. Bond will still be retaining the money for their own departments, though?
That money will flow back into the undesignated fund balance in the fire fund. It won't be appropriated until action by this board. Any others? Give me a roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Hurt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, Highway Department vibratory asphalt roller bid in response to advertisements. For bids, Mr. Woods has received 3 offers, the lowest being for a Volvo from Scott Equipment that meets requirements. Total is $112,147.83, $100,000 which will be coming from the Capital Projects Equipment Fund. The rest come out of the Highway Department equipment line item. This resolution authorizes acceptance of the bid and subsequent purchase.
So moved.
Ms. Hampton,
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Coleman. Discussion.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Hurt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips. Yes. Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
And Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, Highway Department heavy transport trailer bid and their advertisement for bids for a transport trailer. Mr. Woods received one response for a 50-foot unit that meets requirements. This from LMI of Waverly. Total with discount is $68,289.10, minus an allowance for trade-in at $12,000, final cost of $55,298.10. Come out of the Highway Department equipment line item.
Move to approve.
A motion, Mr. Hughes.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hall. Discussion.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Hurt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Phillips. Yes. Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, Governor's Highway Safety Grant. Sheriff applies for this grant on an annual basis. $14,900 award to be reimbursement for expenses associated with anti-DUI enforcement.
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Hunt.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hurt. Discussion.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Hurt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips. Yes. Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, $14,900 appropriation into the sheriff's budget. This in anticipation of reimbursement associated with a previously approved grant. Mr. Dillinger.
Second.
Second, Ms. Hampton. Discussion.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Hurt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Phillips. Yes. Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item, Sheriff's Department building relocation expenses. The sheriff has obtained a 75-foot office facility at no cost. His plan is to place this facility on the west end of the jail compound and use it to consolidate his deputies in one location. Estimated cost for the location and utilities, modifications, etc. is $37,500. Asking for money to be appropriated into the category of county building expenses.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion, Mr. Mayberry.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hughes. Discussion.
Who's gonna contract to put the building in?
The sheriff has a professional transporting company
Okay.
engaged for that purpose.
Okay.
Anything else?
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Hurt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good, thank you. Next item, Class 3 and 4 landfill closure cost. We have a new directive from Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation to close a portion of our demolition landfill. This requires professional oversight, and our environmental consultants from CEC have proposed $8,500 in costs for evaluating the area, establishing a protocol to be acceptable to TDEC. Cost $8,500.
Motion.
The motion, Mr. Hurt.
Second.
Second, Mr. Wagner. Discussion.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Hurt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Solid waste disposal is expensive. Next item, notaries.
We have two nominations this month, Valerie Marley and Crystal Heath, and they are both renewals.
You've heard the report from the clerk. Entertain a motion.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Coleman,
Second.
second, Ms. Hampton. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any other business? Have a motion, Mr. Rochelle.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hurt. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.